Hi, welcome to Camp Kitchen with Chef Joe. Can't make a dream. So we're going to try a little program here. Once a month we're going to pick a featured item and we're going to make a couple of dishes with it. And it is October and I got my three buddies with me because what kind of a warlock would you be without a cat or a couple of attack bears? Fortunately, they're in timeout because they didn't do what I said, and I'll make a spell to bring them back later for all you little kids that are crying because they're dead. So, we're going to sit here and we're going to talk about pumpkins today, though. So, what we're going to do is make some dishes with pumpkin. We're going to do a puree, which is the basics for your pie, your different soups and things like that. And of course the glorious pumpkin seeds and how to roast those and how to do it a little bit different than your parents did, and we'll get into that down the road too. And then we're going to make a great soup. So it's a pumpkin curry soup with local caught fresh trout, and you can use salmon or any other dish that you like. And then we're going to make for dessert a pumpkin chocolate chip cookie out of our puree. So when we get started here, and we're going to get started right now, you can use different squashes. There's different types of pumpkins. You know, you get the great big jack-o'-lantern ones, or these are called the pie pumpkins. They're the smaller ones, and these are the kind of the ones you want to eat with. So they're just got a little bit more sugar in them. They have a little bit more flavor. They're easier to handle. You know, one of the things when we had our farm, my daughter loved these pumpkins. So we had these 200 and 300 pound pumpkins that I had to use the tractor to lift up just to get on the porch. So Halloween comes and goes and these pumpkins are still sitting there, and they are just sitting there because what do you do if you don't have a tractor to move a 300 pound pumpkin? And you know, unless you're making pie for the army, they're just not worth it. So let's stick with the little guys. And we're just going to work our knife down through here. And we're going to start with the puree. So now I've already removed the seeds. But as you can see, there is a little intestinal gut pulp, is the vegetarian way to properly say that. So you're just going to want to scrunch all of this out, and it gets real stringy and it'll burn during the cooking process, so that's kind of why you want to get that out of there. And you can use a spoon or a scraper and we'll get that. So you've got it all cleaned out here, and now this one's ready to go. So what we're going to do is we'll get the other part cleaned out. And half of this we'll roast to make our puree with, but we're also going to cut some of this and peel it and use it for our soup today. And pumpkin, just like any other squash, can be baked, it can be boiled, barbecued, cooked. They all have great flavors, and you can enjoy pumpkin along with everything else. It doesn't just have to be for decoration or pie. You can do breads, you can do cookies like we're doing, soups, bake it. One of the things we like to do is we'll take a half like this and we'll put butter and maple syrup and a little salt and pepper, just like you would with a squash, and then you roast that in about 350 degrees for an hour or so. So the key to baking the pumpkin is you want to bake it, it should be about golden brown, but it'll be fork tender. So that means when you stick a fork into it, you don't have to force that in there. It'll just go in nice and soft. So this is how we've got those nice and clean. Let me clear off the board real quick. And okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to roast some of this pumpkin so we can make our puree. And then the other we're going to peel and make our soup with. You want to cover a cookie sheet. Use a foil or parchment paper because it'll have a little bit of juice that'll come out, and it'll stain it if you don't. It doesn't matter if you set them skin side down or skin side up. I bake them both ways. And you're just going to put them in there, and we're going to roast these at 350 degrees, and it takes about 40 to 45 minutes depending on your oven. So I've already got mine preheated, and we're going to get those going. And we'll set our timer. There we go. Alright, so now when that's done, it's real easy. You just let them cool till you can handle them with your hands, and then you're just going to peel this skin off. And when later on, thanks to the modern miracle of cut and paste and editing, we'll get to those when they're done. So you're just going to peel that off, and then you're just going to put the cooked chunks into a food processor, a blender, a potato masher, whatever you got, and you're just going to mash it up until it's nice and soft like this. Sometimes you might have to add a little bit of water to it while you're pureeing it, but only add about a teaspoon to a tablespoon at a time. So you don't want it too wet. And if you do get it too wet, just put it all into a cheesecloth or a really fine strainer so that water can eke out, and then you're good to go. So pumpkins, it's just like kind of a potato. So you're just going to peel away on it until you get it all peeled off of there. And then we'll cut these up food size, and we'll talk about our soup. We've got our pumpkin all skinned and diced up, and what we're going to do with this right now is one of my favorite dishes. It's a pumpkin curry fish soup, and I use salmon. Today we're going to use fresh trout that we caught, and it's just got lots of good flavor. You can do this as a vegetarian dish strictly and use the vegetarian stock instead of a chicken stock, which what we're going to use today. You can add chicken to this instead of fish, or you can just leave it plain with some more vegetables. It's totally up to you. So I'll show you how we're going to start this. We've got our pumpkin here, and you're going to dice this up just into bite-sized pieces. Now, you could use a puree for this also, but I find that it gives it some nice crunch texture, and it's kind of like just that potato when you're having a potato in your soup, and it just gives it a lot better flavor. And so these are all just cut into bite-sized pieces. We're going to do maybe about a pound of pumpkin, if that. So it's one small pumpkin. And then we're going to do a couple of stalks of celery, and we'll get that diced up here. And you're going to put all of this into the pot, but there's some other magic that we're going to add to it. And again, this is one of those recipes where you can kind of add what you want, but the two main things is the curry, because it is a pumpkin curry soup, and then coconut milk. I mean, you can't beat the combination of curry and coconut and pumpkin. It's just really good. So we're going to add this into our pot. And I don't know about you guys, but when I make my soup, I like somebody to sit down and look at it and think, do I need a fork or a spoon? And by golly, most of the time the answer is you're going to need both, because it's just got to be good and meaty and chunky for me. So, and we'll cut the rest of that up. So now I've got 1 can of coconut milk that we're going to add into this. And usually a can is maybe a cup to a cup and a quarter. It's not too much more than that. And then we're going to add 4 cups of chicken broth. And this is the natural one. I make my own usually, and I usually do it with grouse and pheasant, which is just as good, actually better. But we're going to add 4 cups of that stock or broth to this. And again, you can go vegetarian for the great vegan dish with all of this in it. So now we're going to add some ground turmeric, and it's about a half a teaspoon. So again, these are just guidelines. You can add more. I am a curry fan, so usually it calls for 3 tablespoons of curry, and I kind of go a little bit more than that because we like it a lot. So now we're going to add 2 tablespoons of just granulated sugar. And again, it just kind of gives it a little bit of sweetness and helps blend with the curry. And so now we're going to add 2 tablespoons of fish oil. And now I know probably a lot of you don't cook with fish oil, but it is really something you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to be fishy. Well, it isn't. I mean, it adds a little bit of that fish oil flavor to it, but it's a good source of natural sodium salt. So you want to add that in there. And since we're adding fish to it, it just makes perfect sense to me to use the fish oil. So the next thing we're going to do is lemongrass. So you can buy lemongrass sticks in the jar, and if you're going to do that, use about 3 sticks of lemongrass, and you just set it in there. It's like a bay leaf. It's just going to cook around, swirl around in there. All that great lemongrass flavor is going to leak out of it into your soup. If you can't find the lemongrass, you can find the lemon paste, which is just the crushed up stuff. It's like the ginger, garlic, things like that that you can buy at the local superstore. We've added our lemongrass to it. Now we've mixed all this in there, and we're going to turn this on and we're going to bring it to a boil and let it cook for a bit. Alright, so we've got our pumpkin curry soup going, and we brought this to a boil and let it simmer for about 35 minutes, and the pumpkin is just fork tender. It's still got a little bit of a bite, kind of like a potato, but it's not mushy. So at this point, what we're going to do is add our fish. And like I said, we can use any fish, but we're using trout. And not only trout, but Montana trout that I caught, by golly. And so these have been filleted and skinned and boned. And now what we're going to do is we cut this into about 1-inch pieces, and we're going to add that to the soup, and then we're going to turn the soup off and let it just simmer for about 5 minutes. It does not take very long for the fish to cook, and you can use any kind of fish. I make this with salmon, I make this with halibut, trout. It's just a great soup. And like I said earlier, you can even add chicken to it. So we're going to add that in there, and we'll just get these in here and put that in there. And the heat of that soup is going to cook that fish just perfect. Alright, so we've added our fish, we've turned the heat off, and we've let it set for about 5 minutes. And the heat of the soup is hot enough to cook that fish and not overdo it. And if you can look, we've got nice good chunks of fish and potato, or not potato, the pumpkin. I say potato because it's got that texture, but it's got that great pumpkin flavor and all the different seasonings and spices that we have in there. And so there you have it. Do a nice little wipe down. And then we're just going to garnish that with a few of our roasted pumpkin seeds. Give it that nice crunch instead of a crouton. And then we've got some really fresh sourdough bread that we made. But you know what? That's going to be another segment. So enjoy.